The final skill that we're going to work on with fractions is how to divide them. And the first few slides here are really going to talk about the meaning and help you to discover the meaning of dividing by fractions, because then you'll see that the process we use makes sense. So if I start with a question, how many 1/4 are there in 3? I could draw an area model for 3 and an area model for 1/4 and see how many of those fit in the 3, and you could see that I can fit 4/4 in this one, 4/4 in this one, 4/4 in this one, so my answer is 12. If you think about it, how many halves are there in 1? There's 2 of them, right? And how many halves are there in 2? I'm going to have 4. If I count how many halves there are in 3, I'll get 6. Are you thinking already that if I asked you how many halves are there in 10, you might go 10 times 2 equals 20, because there's 2 halves in each of the 10. So I'm actually turned a question that's dividing, like 10 divided by 1/2, how many 1/2s are there in 10? I actually turned it into a multiplication question in my head to get the answer. Let's see if the same pattern holds through with thirds. How many 1/3 are there in 1? If I were to take 1 and split it into thirds, you can see that there are 3 of them. So how many 1/3 are there going to be in 2? Well, there's going to be 3 times 2, 6 of them. And how many 1/3 will there be in 3? We'll see that there are 9 of them. Many people can do these kinds of questions without having to do any math, but it's interesting to think that that is being done already, that what you're doing is in your head, you're actually dividing fractions. So let's think about dividing a fraction by another fraction. So 2/3 divided by 1/6. That's like asking how many 1/6 are there in 2/3. So we can show it with an area model or a picture first. So this first picture shows 2/3, and the second picture shows 1/6. So I want to see how many of those 1/6 fit in the 2/3. And you can see, hopefully on this diagram, that 1, 2, 3, 4 of them fit in there. So 2/3 divided by 1/6 is equal to 4, because there are 4 1/6 in 2/3. So we don't want to have to draw pictures, though, for fractions, and some fractions will be very difficult to draw the picture for. So let's take a look at the math that happens so that we can do it with every type of fraction. If I have 2/3 divided by 1/6, which is the question we just did, I could do 2/3 times 6/1, and I end up then multiplying my numerators to get 12, multiplying my denominators to get 3, so I get 12/3, which is 4, which is the answer we already got for the earlier question. The first area model we looked at was how many 1/4 are there in 3. So if I do 3 divided by 1/4, I end up with 3 times 4/1, and I end up with 12 as my answer, which is the answer we got earlier. Notice that what we've done is we've turned our dividing question into a multiplying question, and we multiplied by, it's called the reciprocal, when we flip a fraction upside down, reciprocal. So let's take a look at doing some actual questions like this. I've got 2/3 divided by 3/4. That's the same as 2/3 times 4/3. So when I multiply that, I get 8/9. The shortcut for remembering how to divide fractions is actually called keep, switch, flip. We keep the first number the same, we switched from dividing to multiplying, and we flip the second number, so the 3/4 became 4/3. Okay, so if you can remember keep, switch, flip, we can turn every dividing fraction question into a multiplying question, which you've already practiced. So 4/7 divided by 2/3 becomes 4/7, keep, switch to multiplying, and flip the second number. Now before I do the multiplying, I'm going to simplify like we practiced with multiplying fractions. Notice that 4 and 2 can both be divided by 2, and when I do that I end up with a 2 here and a 1 here, so now I have 6/7 as my final answer. And question C, 8/3 divided by 2/5. I keep the first number, I switch to multiplying, I flip the second fraction. And before I multiply, I'm going to just check. The 3 and the 5 don't simplify, but the 8 and the 2 do. I'm going to divide them both by 2. So I have a 4 and a 1. And I'm going to now multiply. So 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 1 is 3. That is in lowest terms, but it needs to be changed to a mixed number. 3 goes into 26 times. 3 times 6 is 18, so there's 2 left over. 6 2/3 is my final answer. And our final question, sorry, I can make that a little bigger. 2/5 divided by 3 becomes 2/5 times, remember that a whole number can be written as 3/1, so when we flip the second number, we end up with 1/3. So when I multiply, I first check if I can simplify, and none of these simplify, so I've got 2 times 1 is 2, 5 times 3 is 15, and that's my final answer. And that's going to take care of dividing fractions, except for mixed numbers, and we'll do those in the next lesson.